Okay, let's unpack this a bit. What if I told you humans aren't just, incredibly intelligent, but perhaps in a really profound evolutionary sense, we've actually kind of domesticated ourselves?
Yeah, it sounds a little out there at first, doesn't it? But that's the core idea behind what's called the human self-domestication hypothesis.
Right.
Essentially, it suggests that early humans, through various social and environmental pressures, started implicitly, maybe even accidentally, selecting individuals within their own groups who were, well, less aggressive.
Less aggressive.
Less reactively aggressive, specifically.
Yeah.
More cooperative, more tolerant. It's about dampening down that impulsive, fight or flight type aggression you see in many wild animals.
Even our close relatives, like chimps.
Exactly, that uncontrolled outburst. We seem to have selected against that quite strongly.
That really clicks, thinking about how vital cooperation must have been. But the really wild part, for me, is this link to the domestication syndrome you see in animals. Like dogs or pigs, they change physically compared to their wild ancestors. So what are the parallels in us?
It's pretty striking, actually, when you compare us, modern humans, to our archaic relatives like Neanderthals or Denisovans. You see some similar patterns.
It shows.
Things like more gracile, sort of more delicate skulls and skeletons, flatter faces, smaller brow ridges, even smaller teeth, especially the canines.
Huh. And I read something about brain size, too. Slightly smaller.
Yeah, there seems to be a slight reduction in overall brain size compared to some ancestors. It sounds weird for intelligence, but it's a trait that pops up in domesticated animals, too.
Interesting.
And also reduced sexual dimorphism. So less physical difference between males and females compared to, say, gorillas or orangutans.
So these aren't just random drifts. They mirror changes in animals we actively domesticated.
Precisely. It suggests there might be some shared underlying biological processes at play. It's a pattern.
Okay, so we've got behavior shifts towards cooperation and these physical echoes of domestication. But how do we know this isn't just coincidence? What's the stronger evidence tying this all together?
Great question. We move beyond just observing similarities. The evidence comes from a mixed behavior, morphology, which we've touched on, and crucially genetics.
Ah, the genetics.
Behaviorally, you've got our increased prosociality, our tendency to be friendly and cooperative, even with people we don't know. That's pretty unique.
Definitely.
Morphologically, those physical traits we just discussed. But the genetics, that's where it gets really compelling. There are overlaps in genes under positive selection genes favored by evolution in both humans and domesticated animals.
Like the same genes are being tweaked?
In some cases, yes, or related pathways, particularly genes involved with neural crest cells. These are super important cells during development, influencing things like facial structure, the adrenal glands, which handle stress response. Basically, things often altered by domestication.
Wow. Any specific examples?
A well-known one involves the BAZ1B gene. It's linked to Williams-Beuren syndrome, where people often have distinctive facial features and are exceptionally friendly and trusting. This gene seems to be under selection in humans and relates to those neural crest pathways.
So this deep dive is really about connecting those dots, the behavior, the bones, the genes, to see how these internal pressures might have fundamentally shaped us into, well, us.
Exactly. If you zoom out, the human self-domestication hypothesis gives a powerful framework for understanding why Homo sapiens are so unique. Our amazing cooperation, our complex societies, maybe even our advanced cognition. It suggests these aren't just about raw intelligence.
They're also a consequence of this shift in social behavior, taming ourselves, essentially.
Kind of, yeah. Driven by internal selection. Think about the mechanisms. One big one is selection against aggression. Richard Wrangham talks about language-based conspiracies, basically.
Right.
The ability for groups to use language to coordinate, identify overly aggressive individuals, and ostracize or even remove them.
So social policing, almost weeding out the excessively disruptive figures.
That's one plausible mechanism. Over time, that would favor genes associated with lower reactive aggression and higher tolerance. This tolerance becomes even more important as groups get bigger, more complex. You have to get along with more people you aren't related to.
And language and culture must have turbocharged this whole process.
Absolutely. Sharing intentions, building complex plans, establishing and enforcing social norms. It all relies on sophisticated communication and shared culture. It likely created a feedback loop. More cooperation allowed bigger groups, which required more tolerance, favoring individuals better equipped for that social environment.
So for you listening, this idea of human self-domestication, It's not just some quirky theory, it's an active area of research, a really powerful lens for looking at our own evolutionary story, right?
Oh, definitely. It's a hypothesis that's constantly being tested and refined with new data.
And it leaves you with a pretty provocative thought, doesn't it?
It really does. If our capacity for cooperation, maybe even our niceness, partly stems from actively, if unconsciously, selecting against certain kinds of aggression within our own species for millennia, what does that mean for how we might consciously or even unconsciously be shaping our social evolution now, especially in this modern world with all its different pressures, conflicts, and, constant information overload? What traits are we selecting for today?
That's something to chew on. What kind of human are we building for the future?